The year 1855 marked the twilight of California's frenzied gold rush, a time when fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye, and desperation clung to the very air, thick with dust and shattered dreams. Yet amidst the relentless churn of humanity and the clamor of pixes against rock, a singular legend began to whisper through the boomtowns and across the dusty trails. It spoke of Eliza May Johnson, a black woman who by that year had amassed a fortune that dwarfed the combined wealth of any white miner in the territory. Her success was an impossible riddle, a dark secret etched into the very bedrock of the Sierra Nevada. How could one woman, starting with nothing in a world designed to deny her everything, achieve such an unthinkable triumph in a land where prejudice was as common as gold dust? Before we continue with the story of Eliza May Johnson, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what state or city you're listening from. Your support helps us uncover more forgotten tales from history. The journey to California in the mid-9th century was a pilgrimage of hope and despair, a brutal odyssey across a continent or around a treacherous cape. For Eliza May Johnson, it was both an escape and a gamble, a desperate leap into the unknown. She arrived in San Francisco in the spring of 1850, a city still more tent than timber, its streets a quagmire of mud and ambition, perpetually under construction and deconstruction. The air hummed with the feverish energy of thousands, a cacophony of languages and dreams, all chasing the elusive gleam of gold. Eliza May, barely 25, carried little more than the clothes on her back, a worn leather satchel containing a few precious keepsakes, and a resolve forged in the crucible of a life that had until then offered only hardship. She had been born into bondage in the humid fields of Georgia, her early years marked by the relentless sun, the backbreaking labor, and the ever-present threat of the whip. Freedom, when it finally came, was a fragile thing, purchased with years of grueling toil, and a small, hard one, but freedom, in the South, for a black woman, was a hollow promise, shadowed by prejudice, violence, and severely limited opportunity. The tales of California, a land where gold lay scattered like pebbles, where a man, or so the whisperers claimed, could rise above his station, ignited a spark within her. It was a desperate hope, but hope nonetheless, a beacon in the oppressive darkness of her past. The long, arduous sea voyage around Cape Horn had tested her spirit. The cramped quarters, meager rations, and constant threat of storms, a constant reminder of the precariousness of her existence. Yet each day at sea, she stared out at the vast, indifferent ocean, imagining a new horizon, a place where her past could not follow, where the chains of memory might finally loosen their grip. San Francisco was a shock. The sheer chaos, the cacophony of languages, the raw, untamed energy of men from every corner of the globe, all driven by a singular, consuming avarice. The smell of salt and pine mingled with the stench of unwashed bodies, stale whiskey, and the ever-present odor of human desperation. Mud thick and clinging, coated everything, a testament to the constant churn of humanity and the lack of any proper infrastructure. But beneath the surface, the familiar currents of prejudice ran deep. Black men and women, though free, found themselves relegated to the margins, often performing the most arduous and least respected labor, their contributions often overlooked, their dignity often challenged. Eliza May, with her quiet dignity and sharp, observant eyes, quickly understood that the gold in the rivers was not the only currency. Information, observation, and an understanding of human nature were just as valuable, if not more so, in this wild, untamed land. She found work almost immediately, not in the mines, but in the bustling makeshift trees that sprang up to serve the endless stream of dirty, desperate miners. The work was back-breaking. Hands roar from lye soap and cold water, the steam from boiling tubs clouding her vision and stinging her eyes. But it offered a unique vantage point. As she scrubbed the grime from canvas trousers and flannel shirts, she listened. She heard the boasts of sudden riches, the laments of crushing losses, the whispered rumors of new strikes, and the dark hushed tales of disappearances and claim disputes. The laundry, she realized, was the nerve center of the camp's gossip, a place where secrets like gold dust often clung to the fabric, waiting to be shaken loose. Her keen mind absorbed it all. She learned the names of the successful, the desperate, the ruthless. She understood the patterns of the gold flow, not just from the earth, but through the hands of men, how it changed hands in saloons, at card tables, and in the dark alleys. She saw how quickly fortunes turned, how easily trust was betrayed, and how the law in these wild territories was often a malleable thing, bent by the strongest will or the heaviest purse. The gold rush was not just a search for precious metal. It was a brutal, unforgiving game of survival, and Eliza May was determined to learn its rules, and perhaps to rewrite them. She saved every penny, her meager earnings slowly accumulating. In a small hidden pouch, she ate sparingly, slept little, and worked tirelessly. Driven by an unyielding purpose, her small, rented room in a crowded boarding house offered little comfort. But it was her own, a sanctuary from the chaos outside. She watched the miners, their faces etched with hope and exhaustion, their eyes gleaming with a dangerous avarice that bordered on madness. She saw the desperation that drove men to violence, to ruin, to madness. She saw the fleeting nature of their gains, how easily a rich strike could be followed by a dry streak, how a lucky find could be gambled away in a single night at a saloon, leaving a man with nothing but regret and empty pockets. The gold, she realized, was a fickle mistress, demanding everything and giving little in return. Eliza May understood that true wealth wasn't just about finding gold, it was about keeping it, about understanding the currents of power and influence that flowed beneath the surface of the chaotic boomtowns. She observed the merchants, the bankers, the saloon owners, the ones who consistently profited regardless of who struck it rich or went bust. They didn't dig in the dirt, they controlled the flow, the supply, the credit. Her goal was not just to survive, but to thrive, to build a fortress of security that no man, no prejudice, could ever breach again. The path to that fortress, she sensed, lay not in the backbreaking labor of the mines, but in the shadows and whispers of the men who toiled there, and the secrets they inadvertently revealed. She spent her evenings poring over discarded newspapers, learning about land, claims, water rights, and the ever-shifting legal landscape of the territory. She taught herself to read and write with a fierce determination, understanding that knowledge was a weapon, a tool for survival. The sounds of distant gunshots and drunken brawls were a constant lullaby in the burgeoning town, a stark reminder of the thin veneer of civilization. Eliza May knew that to survive she had to be more than just Aries. She had to be an architect of her own destiny. Brick by painstaking brick, she moved from San Francisco to the burgeoning mining camp of Serpent's Gulch in late 1850, drawn by the promise of more direct access to the miners and their secrets. Serpent's Gulch, nestled deep in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, was a raw, untamed place. Its main street, a muddy track lined with ramshackle saloons, general stores, and tents that seemed to lean precariously against each other. The air here was thick with the scent of pine, sweat, and the metallic temps of ambition. It was a place where fortunes were made and lost with brutal speed, and where the line between law and lawlessness was often blurred beyond recognition. Here, Eliza May established her own small laundry, a canvas tent with a roaring fire and bubbling tubs, positioning herself at the very heart of the camp's daily rhythm. She was a silent observer, a shadow in plain sight, watching the men come and go, their faces telling stories even their lips dared not utter. The winter of 18 descended upon Serpent's Gulch with a vengeance, blanketing the rugged landscape in a thick, unforgiving snow. The cold bit deep, slowing the frantic pace of mining, but intensifying the desperation that gnawed at the men's souls. The air grew thin and sharp, carrying the scent of woods and distant pine, but also an undercurrent of something colder, more unsettling, a premonition of dread. The wind howled through the canyons, a mournful dirge that seemed to carry the unspoken fears of the men who huddled in their flimsy tents, their breath misting in the frigid air. It was during this brutal season that the first of the disappearances began, not just of men, but of entire claims, as if the earth itself was swallowing them whole. Old Man Hemlock, a grizzled prospector, known for his stubbornness and a streak of luck that had recently turned, vanished without a trace. His claim, a small but consistently yielding patch along the Serpent River, was found abandoned, his tools scattered, his tent collapsed, half buried in snow. The general consensus among the miners, huddled around roaring fires in the saloon, was that he'd either struck it rich and fled, or more likely succumbed to the elements or a desperate claim jumper. Just another fool who thought he could outrun the mountains, grumbled one miner, warming his hands over a sputtering stove, his voice laced with a mixture of fear and fatalism. But Eliza May, scrubbing Hemlock's last batch of muddy trousers, noticed something peculiar. A small, intricately carved, wooden bird, a trinket he always kept in his breast pocket, was missing. Hemlock was a creature of habit, a man who clung to his few possessions with a fierce loyalty, each item a tether to a life he had left behind. That bird was his constant companion, a smooth, dark piece of wood he'd often rub between his fingers while he spoke, a talisman against the harshness of the world. Its absence felt wrong, too deliberate for a simple flight or a random act of violence. It was as if someone had taken a piece of him, a signature of his existence, a final chilling flourish. Then came the case of the Miller brothers, two burly men from Ohio, who had recently boasted of a significant strike, their pockets jingling with fresh gold dust. Their laughter had been loud, their boasts even louder, echoing through the frigid night from the Golden Nugget Saloon. They were last seen celebrating boisterously, their faces flushed with whiskey and triumph, their voices carrying promises of a return to their families, rich men, their days of toil behind them. By morning, their tent was empty, their claim deserted, and their tools gone. The only sign of their presence was a half-eaten plate of beans, now frozen solid, on their makeshift table, and the lingering scent of cheap tobacco. Again, the whisper spoke of foul play, of a quick, brutal end for men foolish enough to flaunt their wealth in a place like Serpent's Gulch. But Eliza May, collecting their laundry from their abandoned tent, found a small leather-bound journal, tucked beneath a loose floorboard. It was a detailed record of their mining efforts, their daily yields, and more importantly, their growing suspicions. They had written about a shadow that seemed to follow them, a feeling of being watched, and a growing unease about a particular section of their claim, a section they believed held a deeper, richer vein. They had also noted strange markings, almost like symbols carved into the rocks near their claim boundary, symbols they couldn't decipher, but found unsettling. The journal was a raw, unfiltered account of their mounting fear, a chilling testament to a terror that had no name, a fear that had driven them to write down their every thought, every suspicion, as if to leave a breadcrumb trail for someone to follow. The disappearances continued, each one leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a chilling sense of unease that settled over Serpent's Gulch like the winter fog. A young Swede named Lars, known for his quiet diligence, vanished after claiming to have found something unusual in his pan, a rock that shone with an inner light. A boisterous Irishman, Patrick Ali, disappeared after a heated argument over a disputed boundary line. A line he swore was marked by peculiar stones, unlike any I've seen. It wasn't just the men who vanished, it was their claims, often the most promising ones, that seemed to evaporate into thin air, only to be quietly re-registered under new names weeks later, often by men who had previously shown little interest in that particular area, men who seemed to appear from nowhere. The local justice, a self-appointed sheriff named Silas Croft, a man with a perpetually grim expression and a penchant for looking the other way, offered little comfort. His investigations were cursory, his conclusions always pointing to the dangers of the wilderness or the inherent greed of men. He'd shrugged, spit tobacco juice into the snow, and declare, "Another one gone to the mountains or to the devil. Ain't no law out here but what a man makes for himself." His words meant to dismiss only deepened the sense of dread, painting a picture of a lawless land where life was cheap and justice a luxury, a commodity rarely found. But Eliza May saw a pattern, a cold, calculated logic beneath the chaos. Each vanished miner had, in the days leading up to their disappearance, shown signs of unusual success, or had expressed a newfound excitement about a specific part of their claim. And each time a small personal item, something deeply significant to the individual, was conspicuously absent. It was as if a silent, meticulous hand was at work, not just taking lives or gold, but erasing identities, leaving behind only the barest, most unsettling clues. The cold, hard truth began to dawn on Eliza May. These were not random acts of violence or unfortunate accidents. This was something far more sinister. A calculated, methodical operation designed to seize wealth and silence anyone who got too close to a deeper secret. The gold fever that gripped Serpent's Gulch was not just a disease of ambition, it was a contagion of fear, and Eliza May, with her quiet observations, was beginning to feel its chilling touch. The journal of the Miller brothers, now hidden beneath her own floorboards, felt like a ticking clock, a silent testament to a truth no one else dared to acknowledge. The symbols described in the journal, crude etchings of interlocking triangles and circles, began to haunt her thoughts, appearing in her mind's eye whenever she closed them, a silent, cryptic language of danger. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than a simple claim dispute. It was a secret woven into the very fabric of Serpent's Gulch, a secret that promised immense wealth to those who understood it, and a swift, silent end to those who merely stumbled upon it. The Miller brothers' journal became Eliza May's secret burden, a heavy weight beneath the floorboards of her small laundry tent, a constant presence in her thoughts. Every night, by the flickering smoky light of a tallow candle, she would retrieve it, her fingers tracing the faded ink, her mind wrestling with the cryptic entries. The symbols, those interlocking triangles and circles, were a recurring motif sketched crudely next to entries, detailing significant gold finds or moments of heightened paranoia. They were not random doodles. They were markers, a silent language, a chilling code left by men who had vanished into the unforgiving wilderness, their voices silenced forever. The paper, brittle with age and dampness, crackled softly as she turned the pages, each rustle a whisper of the past, a ghostly echo of the Miller brothers' fear. Eliza May began to connect these symbols to the locations mentioned in the journal. The Miller brothers had been working a claim near a distinctive rock formation, a jagged outcropping known locally as Devil's Tooth, a place where the wind always seemed to moan, a low, mournful tune. She remembered Hemlock's claim further upriver, also near a similar, though smaller, formation. A cluster of dark volcanic rocks that seemed to absorb the light, casting long, eerie shadows. And Lars, the quiet Swede, had been panning near a cluster of ancient gnarled oaks that stood like sentinels on a ridge, their roots clinging to the earth in a pattern that in her mind's eye began to resemble the very symbols she saw in the journal. The landscape itself, she realized, was a map, if only she knew how to read its ancient, silent language. She started to pay closer attention to the men who frequented her laundry, particularly those who had recently acquired claims that had once belonged to the vanished. There was a man named Elias Thorne, a gaunt taciturn figure who had arrived in Serpent's Gulch with little more than a pickaxe and a haunted look in his eyes, as if he carried a heavy secret. He had almost overnight become the owner of Hemlock's old claim, and his once threadbare clothes were now replaced with finer woolens, though they still carried the faint scent of pine and something metallic, something that wasn't gold. He never spoke much, but Eliza May noticed the way his eyes darted, always scanning, always watchful, like a cornered animal, perpetually on guard. She also observed a subtle change in his demeanor. A nervous energy had replaced his initial desperation, a kind of guarded triumph, a glint of something cold and calculating in his gaze. He paid his laundry bills, promptly, always in freshly panned gold dust, but his hands trembled slightly as he handed it over, as if the gold itself burned him. Another figure was a merchant named Arthur Finch, a man who ran the general store. His smile always too wide, too practiced, his eyes too sharp, like a hawk's missing nothing. Finch seemed to profit immensely from the misfortunes of others, always ready to buy up abandoned equipment or sell supplies on credit at exorbitant rates. His ledger always balanced in his favor, never in the minor's. He was often seen conversing, in hushed tones with Croft, their heads bent together in the dim light of the saloon, their words lost to the general din of the camp, but their gestures speaking volumes of a shared understanding, a silent complicity. Eliza May had noticed Finch wearing a small silver pendant, almost hidden beneath his shirt, bearing a symbol strikingly similar to those in the journal. It was a fleeting glimpse, a glint of metal against his dark vest, but it solidified a chilling suspicion. The pendant was not a common design. It was unique, almost tribal in its simplicity, yet deeply unsettling, a mark of belonging to something hidden. The whispers among the remaining miners grew darker, more desperate. They spoke of bad luck, claims of places where the gold seemed to cursed, where men simply disappeared, swallowed by the earth or the shadows. "It's the spirits of the mountains," one old-timer would croak, his voice raspy from years of dust and whiskey, his eyes wide with superstitious fear. "They don't like men digging too deep." But Eliza May knew it wasn't luck or it was a deliberate, orchestrated pattern, a cold human hand at work. She began to map out the disappearances, mentally placing them on the rough map of Serpent's Gulch. She had pieced together from conversations and observations. A chilling constellation began to form. The vanished claims were not random. They formed a loose perimeter around a central Les mine area, a rugged, almost inaccessible canyon known as the Serpent's Moor. The very name sent a shiver down her spine. A place few dared to venture, rumored to be haunted by ancient spirits, or dangerous beasts, a place of ill omen. One evening, while mending a torn shirt belonging to a new miner, a young man named Thomas, she overheard a fragment of conversation. Thomas was speaking to a grizzled veteran, complaining about his poor luck. "I swear the ground here is cursed," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow with a grimy hand. "I found a strange rock today, near the old Hemlock claim. Had some queer markings on it, like a child's drawing, but sharper somehow, like they were meant to mean something." Eliza May's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs, threatening to betray her calm exterior. "What kind of markings?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral, her hand still busy with the needle, though her fingers trembled slightly. Thomas shrugged, dismissing it. "Just some triangles and circles all jumbled up. Threw it back in the river. Didn't want no bad luck." He shuddered, as if the memory itself was cold, brushed with something unsettling. Eliza May felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, a knot of fear tightening in her gut. The symbols were not just in the journal, they were physically present in the landscape, a silent, ominous signpost, a warning, etched into the very earth. She realized that the disappearances were not just about gold. They were about control. Someone was systematically clearing out specific claims, perhaps to consolidate a larger, more valuable territory or to hide something far more significant than a simple gold vein. The shadows of the past were not just whispers. They were etched into the very rocks of Serpent's Gulch, waiting to be read by someone brave enough to look. And Eliza May, against her better judgment, felt an irresistible pull towards that dangerous knowledge. The air in her small tent suddenly felt heavy, thick with unspoken secrets and the chilling possibility that she too was now marked, a silent target in a deadly game. Before we delve deeper into Eliza May's dangerous discoveries, we want to hear from you. What are your theories so far? Do you think Eliza May is right to be suspicious? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you're enjoying this chilling tale, and share it with a friend who loves a good mystery. Armed with the journal and her growing suspicions, Eliza May began a dangerous double life. By day, she was the quiet, industrious, her hands perpetually busy, her face serene, her movements efficient. A picture of unassuming diligence. The scent of lye and damp cloth clung to her, a comforting mask that hid her true intentions. By night, she was a silent investigator, her mind piecing together fragments of information, her courage hardening with each passing day, fueled by a desperate need for security. She started to make discreet inquiries, not directly about the disappearances, but about the history of the claims, the geological makeup of the area, and the men who had come and gone. Their stories fading into the dust. She'd ask seemingly innocent questions while mending a torn seam or serving a cup of coffee, her eyes never leaving the faces of the men she questioned, searching for any flicker of discomfort or recognition, any telltale sign. She learned that the symbols, the interlocking triangles and circles were not random. Through careful observation of old discarded maps, she found in the general stores, refuse, and hushed conversations with a few older, more knowledgeable miners who had been in the territory for years. She discovered they were ancient survey markers used by a forgotten, perhaps even indigenous people to denote areas of unusual mineral deposits. Not necessarily gold, but other rarer elements often found in conjunction with gold, but far more difficult to extract and identify. These symbols had been dismissed by most gold seekers as mere curiosities or superstitions, remnants of a bygone era. Indian markings. They'd scoff, spitting tobacco juice, nothing but old tailies to scare greenhorns. But the Miller brothers' journal had hinted at something more. They had found a strange, heavy, dark rock within their claim. A rock that seemed to hum with an unnatural energy, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. And it was near this rock that they had seen the symbols. They had described it as cold to the touch, yet radiating a strange heat, and noted how it made their compasses spin wildly, defying logic. Eliza May began to visit the abandoned claims, always under the cover of dusk or dawn, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, the chill morning air biting at her exposed skin. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, but also a faint metallic temps in certain spots. She would walk the perimeter, her eyes scanning the rocks, the trees, the very earth for any sign of the symbols. She found them faint and weathered near Hemlock's old claim, near Lars's panning spot, always in places where the ground felt strangely different, sometimes warmer, sometimes colder than the surrounding earth. She also noticed a peculiar type of vegetation growing in these areas, a stunted, discolored moss that seemed to thrive where nothing else would, its tendrils a sickly green against the gray rock, a silent indicator of something unnatural beneath. It was a subtle detail easily overlooked by men blinded by gold fever. But to Eliza May, it was another crucial piece of the puzzle. Her observations led her to a chilling conclusion. The vanished miners weren't just finding gold, they were stumbling upon something else. Something hidden beneath the surface. Something far more valuable or dangerous. And the symbols marked its presence. The men who were disappearing were not just victims of claim jumpers. They were being silenced because they had discovered a secret that someone desperately wanted to keep bare. This other element, whatever it was the true prize. And its extraction required a level of secrecy and ruthlessness that dwarfed the common greed of the gold rush. It was a secret that promised immense power and wealth, but demanded absolute silence. Her focus narrowed to Arthur Finch, the merchant, and Sheriff Croft. Finch, with his silver pendant, seemed to be the orchestrator, the one who profited from the bad luck claims, always ready to swoop in and acquire them for a pittance, his smile never quite reaching his calculating eyes. Croft, with his convenient dismissals and his heavy-handed authority, was the enforcer, ensuring no real investigation ever took place, his presence a constant silent threat to anyone who dared to question the official narrative. Eliza May began to observe their interactions more closely. She noticed Finch would often send Croft on patrols to specific areas, always coinciding with a new miner showing unusual interest in a marked claim. She also noticed a steady stream of men, rough-looking and unfamiliar, passing through Finch's store late at night, their faces grim, their movements furtive. They were not miners. They were muscle, hired hands, their heavy boots leaving distinct deep prints in the mud outside Finch's back door. Prints that always led towards the serpent's moor. One afternoon, while delivering a freshly laundered shirt to Finch's store, she saw him poring over a large rolled-up map, its edges frayed with age, its surface covered in faint hand-drawn lines. On the map, faint but discernible, were the same interlocking triangles and circles, marking various points across the Serpent's Gulch territory. And at the center of these marked points, a large ominous X was drawn over the Serpent's Moor. The very canyon rumored to be cursed, a place of dread. Finch quickly rolled up the map when he saw her, his smile faltering for a split second, his eyes narrowing, a flash of something cold and predatory in their depths. Just planning some new supply routes. Eliza May, he said, his voice little too jovial, a little too quick, a forced lightness that didn't quite ring true. But Eliza May had seen enough. The map was not for supply routes. It was a blueprint of their deadly operation, a map to a hidden treasure guarded by silence and death. The mystery was no longer just about who was disappearing. It was about what they were disappearing for. The gold was a distraction, a glittering veil over a far darker truth, a truth that promised a different kind of fortune. Eliza May realized that her own life was now in peril. She possessed knowledge that could unravel Finch and Croft's entire enterprise. And in a place like Serpent's Gulch, knowledge was a dangerous burden, a heavy weight that could crush her. She had to be careful, silent, and above all, strategic. She had to turn this dangerous secret into her own advantage, or risk becoming another forgotten shadow in the mountains. Her story lost to the wind. The air around her seemed to thicken with the weight of her discovery. Every crick of the floorboards, every distant shout, now seemed to carry a new ominous meaning, a warning of the danger she now faced. Eliza May knew she was playing a deadly game. The knowledge she possessed was a double-edged sword offering potential power, but also immediate peril, a constant threat hanging over her head. She had to move with extreme caution, her every action calculated, her every word weighed, her every glance measured. The air in Serpent's Gulch felt heavier, charged with an unspoken menace that seemed to emanate from the very earth. From the shadows that lengthened with each passing day, she began to subtly alter her routine, taking longer circuitous routes to her laundry, observing the movements of Finch's hired men, noting their faces, their habits, the way they carried their weapons, the direction of their gazes, their preferred haunts. She noticed they often gathered at a secluded cabin on the outskirts of the camp, a place known only to a few, where the air always seemed to hang heavy with a strange acrid smell, a metallic taste that made her nose wrinkle and her throat catch. Her first strategic move was to secure her own position. She had saved enough to buy a small plot of land, not for mining, but for a permanent structure for her laundry business, a sturdy wooden shack that offered more security than her canvas tent. This gave her a sense of rootedness, a legitimate reason to remain in Serpent's Gulch, and a more secure place to hide her growing collection of clues. The journal, the scraps of maps, the strange discolored rocks she had secretly collected from the marked claims. The act of building, of hammering nails and raising walls, was a defiant statement in a transient world, a declaration of her intent to stay. She also began to cultivate relationships with other marginalized members of the community. The Chinese laborers who toiled tirelessly, their faces impassive but their eyes missing nothing. The few Native Americans who still lingered near the camps, their faces etched with ancient wisdom. The other black women who worked as cooks and cleaners, their lives mirroring her own struggles. They were the invisible eyes and ears of the Gulch, often overlooked, but privy to a wealth of information, fragments of conversations, hushed warnings, subtle shifts in the camp's undercurrents. She traded services for whispers, a mended shirt, for a rumor, a hot meal, for an observation, building a silent network of trust and shared vulnerability, a web of information that Finch and Croft never suspected. The tension escalated when one of Finch's men, a burly brute named Jed, a man whose eyes held a chilling emptiness, began to frequent her laundry, his gaze lingering on her with an unsettling intensity. He would ask probing questions, disguised as casual conversation, his voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, a constant low thrum of menace. "Heard you're a smart one, Eliza May. Always got your ear to the ground, eh?" He'd lean against the doorframe, blocking the light, his shadow falling over her work, a dark, oppressive presence. Eliza May met his gaze with a calm, unreadable expression. "Just trying to make an honest living, same as everyone else," she'd reply, her voice steady, her hands never faltering in their work. Though inside her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, desperate for escape. She knew she was being tested, watched her every move, scrutinized, her composure a fragile shield. One moonless night, a few weeks later, she heard a commotion outside her tent, a muffled struggle, a desperate gasp that was quickly cut short. Peeking through a crack in the canvas, her breath catching in her throat, she saw Jed and two other men, dragging a struggling figure towards a serpent's moor. The man's muffled cries were quickly silenced, a sickening thud echoing in the stillness of the night, followed by the crunch of snow under heavy boots. The air grew cold, and a primal fear gripped her, a cold hand squeezing her heart, threatening to stop its beat. This was not just about gold. It was about absolute control, about eliminating any obstacle, any witness, with ruthless, terrifying efficiency. The chilling silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream, a testament to the finality of their actions. Eliza May realized she couldn't confront them directly. She needed leverage, something undeniable, something that would turn their own greed against them, a weapon forged from their own dark secrets. She returned to the Miller brothers' journal, rereading the entries about the strange, heavy, dark rock. She remembered the discolored moss, the unusual feel of the earth, the acrid smell from the secluded cabin. She began to suspect that the other element was not just valuable, but perhaps dangerous, even toxic. A substance that required careful handling and secrecy. A substance that could sicken or kill. This would explain the secrecy, the need to eliminate witnesses, and the strange cabin with its acrid smell. They weren't just mining. They were processing something. Something that left a lingering poisonous residue. Something that could be used against them. Cheater decided to use Finch's own greed against him. She started to spread subtle rumors, carefully crafted whispers, about a new strike in a remote, unmarked area. An area she knew was not part of Finch's network, but was close enough to one of the marked claims to pique his interest. She let it be known through a carefully chosen intermediary, an old Chinese cook who owed her a favor, a man whose quiet observations were as keen as her own, that she had acquired a small, seemingly worthless claim in that area, a claim she was considering selling due to its unusual soil composition. She was baiting the trap, using her perceived vulnerability as a lure, a calculated risk. Finch, ever the opportunist, took the bait. He sent Jed to negotiate with her. Jed arrived at her laundry, his face grim, his eyes cold, a predatory glint in them, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. "Heard you got a little piece of dirt? You're looking to unload Eliza May?" he sneered, his voice dripping with thinly veiled threat. "Finch is willing to take it off your hands. For a fair price, of course." Eliza May looked him dead in the eye, her own gaze unwavering. A silent challenge. "My dirt is worth more than you know, Mr. Jed. It has a unique quality, a quality that only certain men would understand." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. A silent challenge, a veiled threat that hinted a deeper knowledge. Perhaps, Mr. Finch would be interested in a private conversation, without intermediaries. "I believe we have much to discuss about the true value of certain unlucky claims in this gulch." Jed's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise, then suspicion, then a dawning comprehension that slowly spread across his brutish features. He knew she was playing a game, but he couldn't quite grasp the rules, or the depth of her knowledge, or how she had acquired it. The tension in the small tent was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken threats and hidden agendas. Eliza May had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, and she knew with a chilling certainty that this was the point of no return. The game had begun in earnest, and her life and her fortune hung in the balance, poised on the edge of a knife. Just when we thought we'd seen it all, the horror in Serpent's Gulch intensifies. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to never miss stories like this. Let's discover together what happens next. The meeting was set for the following evening in the back room of Finch's General Store, a space usually reserved for counting gold and storing illicit whiskey. The air was thick with the smell of dust, old leather, and the unspoken tension that crackled between them. Almost visible in the dim, flickering light of the single lantern that hung precariously from the ceiling. Finch sat behind a heavy wooden desk, his fingers drumming in nervous rhythm on its surface, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Sheriff Croft stood silently beside him, his hand resting casually yet menacingly on the butt of his revolver, his eyes like chips of ice, cold and unblinking. Jed stood by the door, a silent, menacing sentinel, his bulk filling the doorway, cutting off any easy escape, his presence a palpable threat. Eliza May, dressed in her cleanest, simplest dress, sat opposite Finch, her hands folded calmly in her lap, her face a mask of quiet determination, betraying none of the frantic beating of her heart, none of the cold fear that coiled in her stomach. "So, Eliza May," Finch began, his voice smooth as polished stone, a deceptive calm that barely masked the coiled anger and apprehension beneath. "Jed tells me you have a proposition. Something about a unique claim." His eyes, however, were not on her, but on the small leather-bound journal she had deliberately placed on the table between them. Its worn cover a stark contrast to the polished wood. A silent accusation. Eliza May met his gaze directly, her own eyes unwavering, holding his with a quiet intensity. "Indeed, Mr. Finch, a unique claim and unique knowledge." She pushed the journal forward, sliding it gently across the table until it rested just within his reach, a silent air. This belonged to the Miller brothers. They were observant men, and they wrote everything down, every detail, every suspicion. Finch's smile vanished, replaced by a grimace of pure venom, his lips thinning into a cruel line. Croft shifted, his hand tightening audibly on his weapon, the metallic click of the hammer a chilling punctuation mark. Jed took a menacing step forward, his shadow falling over Eliza May, engulfing her in darkness. "What is this woman?" Finch hissed, his voice losing its veneer of civility. A raw edge of fear and fury creeping in, betraying his carefully constructed composure. "It's a record, Mr. Finch," Eliza May replied, her voice steady, clear, and devoid of any tremor, cutting through the tension. "Of their discoveries, not just of gold, but of the strange, heavy, dark rock they found. The one that hummed with an unnatural energy, the one that made their compasses spin wildly, defying all natural laws. The one that grows near the ancient markers, the ones you've been so diligently clearing claims around, one by one." She paused, letting her words sink in, each one a carefully aimed arrow striking true. "And it's a record of their suspicions, of the shadows that followed them, and of the men who silenced them. Men like Jed, perhaps." Her gaze flickered to the brute by the door, who flinched almost imperceptibly, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Finch's face was a mask of cold fury, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the desk, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "You're talking nonsense. These men simply vanished, as many do in this wilderness. The mountains claim their share, and the rivers take the rest. Do they, Mr. Finch?" Eliza May countered, her gaze unwavering, her voice gaining a quiet power that filled the small room. "Or are they made to vanish? Like Old Man Hemlock, whose intricately carved bird was taken as a trophy, a macabre souvenir of a life extinguished. Like Lars, the quiet Swede, who spoke of unusual finds and then disappeared into the snow, leaving no trace. Like Patrick Ali, who argued over a boundary marked by peculiar stones and was never seen again. All of them stumbling upon the same secret, marked by the same symbols, and then gone. And their claims, conveniently acquired by you or your associates, often for a fraction of their true worth before the bodies were even cold." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though it carried clearly, in the tense silence, each word a hammer blow. "I know about the other element, Mr. Finch, the one that is not gold, but far more valuable to the burgeoning industries back east. A mineral that promises a future beyond the fleeting gleam of gold. I know it's far more dangerous to extract, requiring specialized knowledge and equipment and leaving a trail of sickness. I know about the cabin and the acrid smell of its processing, a smell that clings to the clothes of your men, a telltale sign. I know about the men you employ to ensure your secrets remain buried, men who are not afraid to use violence to silence any witness. I know you're not just mining, you're orchestrating a deadly enterprise, processing something that could make you richer than any gold strike if you can keep it quiet. And you have kept it quiet, Mr. Finch, through fear and murder, through a systematic campaign of terror." Croft finally spoke, his voice a low growl, his hand now fully gripping his revolver, the barrel glinting dully in the lantern light. "You've seen too much, woman. You won't leave this room alive." The metallic click of his hammer being cocked echoed ominously, a sound that promised immediate violence. "Perhaps not," Eliza May said, a faint, chilling smile touching her lips, a smile that held no mirth, only a profound understanding of the stakes, a grim acceptance. "But others have seen it, too. Others know. I have taken the liberty of sharing this journal and my detailed observations with a network of trusted individuals. Should I not emerge from this room, or should any harm befall me, this information, along with details of your entire operation, your map, and the true nature of what you're extracting will be made public. It will reach the ears of the authorities in Sacramento, and perhaps even further to the newspapers in San Francisco and beyond. And then, Mr. Finch, your carefully constructed empire of silence will crumble. The gold rush will turn into a scandal. Your name will be synonymous with murder and deceit, a stain that no amount of gold can wash away. And you, Sheriff Croft, will be exposed as nothing more than a hired thug, a corrupt official who turned a blind eye to atrocities, A man who sold his soul for a few pieces of silver. Finch's eyes darted to Croft, then to Ged, then back to Eliza May. His face a mask of wearing emotions. Rage, fear, and a dawning, chilling realization that he had been outmaneuvered. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the distant sounds of the camp, a dog barking, a drunken shout, sounds that seemed impossibly far away, belonging to a different world. He knew Eliza May was not bluffing. The sheer audacity of her plan, the meticulousness of her investigation, the depth of her knowledge, had caught him completely if he had underestimated the quietus, seeing only her race and her gender, not the steel forged in a lifetime of struggle, not the formidable intellect hidden behind her calm demeanor. The other element was indeed far more valuable than gold, a rare mineral used in known industrial processes, and its secret extraction was his ticket to unimaginable wealth. A wealth he was not prepared to lose, not even to save his soul. He needed the silence, the discretion, and perhaps her uncanny ability to spot the patterns, to read the landscape, to understand the subtle signs that others, blinded by greed, missed. "What do you want?" Finch finally asked, his voice tight, with suppressed rage, a vein throbbing visibly in his temple, his defeat a bitter taste in his mouth. The question was a surrender, a bitter admission of his powerlessness in the face of her cunning. "I want a partnership, Mr. Finch," Eliza May stated calmly, her voice unwavering, a quiet triumph in her tone. "A significant share of your enterprise. In exchange for my silence, my discretion, and my unique ability to identify these marked claims before others stumble upon them, I will be your eyes and ears, your silent partner, ensuring your operation remains undisturbed, expanding efficiently and without public notice. And I want a guarantee of my safety and the safety of those I care for. A written agreement, notarized and held by a third party of my choosing. A man of impeccable reputation in Sacramento. A man who knows the value of secrets." Finch stared at her, his mind racing, weighing the catastrophic cost of exposure against the bitter pill of compliance. The gold rush was fading. But this other element was the future. A future he now had to share. He slowly pushed the journal back across the table, his hand trembling slightly, his gaze still fixed on her with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "You drive a hard bargain, Eliza May Johnson," he said, his voice a low growl tinged with a chilling undercurrent of resentment and a promise of future retribution. A silent vow that this would not be the end of their struggle. "Very well, we have a deal." The handshake was cold, firm, and fraught with unspoken dangers. A pact forged in fear and ambition. A silent agreement that would forever bind them. Eliza May had not just survived, she had turned the tables, leveraging her knowledge and her courage into a position of undeniable power. She had found her gold, not in the dirt, but in the dark heart of Serpent's Gulch. A fortune built on secrets and the silent terror of others. A fortune that would change her life forever. From that night forward, Eliza May Johnson's fortune in Serpent's Gulch began its meteoric rise. She was no longer just a laundress. She was a silent partner in a clandestine operation, her name never appearing on official documents. Yet her influence growing with every passing month, a shadow power in the burgeoning territory. Finch, bound by the chilling terms of their agreement, found himself grudgingly reliant on her. Eliza May's uncanny ability to identify the marked claims, to read the subtle signs in the landscape and the whispers among the miners proved invaluable. She guided Finch's men to new deposits of the rare mineral, ensuring their operations remained discreet and highly profitable, avoiding the pitfalls of public scrutiny and claim disputes that plagued other ventures. The acrid smell from the processing cabin continued, a constant reminder of the dangerous work. But now Eliza May understood its source and its immense silent value. By 1855, the gold rush was waning. The easy gold, long gone, and many miners were packing up their meager belongings, leaving California as poor as they had arrived. Their dreams turned to dust, their hopes shattered. The boom towns began to shrink, their wooden structures weathering under the relentless sun, slowly returning to the earth from which they sprang. But Eliza May Johnson's wealth was not tied to the fickle fortunes of placer mining. Her fortune was built on the steady, secret extraction of the other element, a mineral that was quietly becoming crucial for emerging industrial technologies back east, a substance that promised a future far beyond the fleeting gleam of gold. She invested her share shrewdly, not in more claims, but in legitimate businesses. A thriving freight company that transported goods between San Francisco and the dwindling mining camps. A small but reputable bank that offered loans at reasonable rates to struggling merchants and eventually prime real estate in the burgeoning city of Sacramento. Her business acumen was undeniable. Her decisions always precise, always profitable, always a step ahead of the competition. Her wealth became undeniable, a quiet, formidable presence in a world that still struggled to comprehend it. A testament to a power that defied conventional understanding. She moved from her humble laundry tent to a modest but elegant house in Sacramento, a place of quiet dignity, its windows looking out onto streets that were slowly transforming from muddy tracks to paved thoroughfares, a symbol of progress and permanence. She never flaunted her riches, never spoke of the dark origins of her initial capital, allowing the whispers to remain just that, whispers. To the outside world, she was a shrewd businesswoman, a woman of remarkable foresight and industriousness, who had simply made good in the Wild West, a testament to the American dream, albeit one with a hidden, chilling foundation. The whispers about her past, about the impossible speed of her ascent, were always there, circulating like smoke. But they were vague, unsubstantiated, easily dismissed as envy or racial prejudice, or simply the wild tales of the gold rush, too fantastical to be true. Sheriff Croft eventually left Serpent's Gulch, his pockets heavy, his face still grim, but with a new, unsettling tremor in his hands. A constant reminder of the dark deeds he had overseen, the lives he had allowed to be extinguished. He vanished into the anonymity of a larger city, forever haunted by the silent pact he had made. A man who had traded his soul for a comfortable retirement. Arthur Finch, though immensely wealthy, remained in the Gulch, his eyes perpetually haunted, his smile never quite reaching them. A man trapped by his own ambition and the chilling alliance he had forged. He continued his operations, expanding them, but the joy of his illicit gains was forever tainted by the silent, watchful presence of Eliza, a constant reminder of the woman who had outsmarted him, who held his darkest secrets in her hands. He knew with a chilling certainty that she was the true power behind his success, and that she could at any moment bring his world crashing down with a single damning word, a single piece of evidence. Eliza, however, never sought revenge or public exposure. Her goal had been survival, security, and true freedom. A freedom that only immense wealth could provide in that era, a shield against the prejudices and limitations that had once defined her life. She used her fortune to uplift her community, quietly funding schools for black children, supporting struggling families, and advocating for civil rights, always from the shadows, never seeking recognition. Her philanthropy, as discreet as her business dealings. The journal of the Miller brothers remained hidden, tucked away in a locked strongbox, a silent testament to the dark path she had walked, a reminder of the cost of her extraordinary success, and the secrets that still lay buried, waiting to be discovered by another curious mind. The legend of Eliza May Johnson grew a tale whispered around campfires and in saloons, a riddle that defied explanation. How did a black woman, starting with nothing, become richer than any white miner by 80? The official records offered no answers, only the undeniable fact of her prosperity. Her name etched into the deeds of properties and the ledgers of banks, a silent monument to her triumph. The truth, however, lay buried deep in the earth of Serpent's Gulch, a secret known only to a few, and guarded by the chilling silence of the mountains and the quiet, formidable will of Eliza May Johnson. Her story was a testament to the brutal realities of the gold rush, where true wealth was often found, not in the glittering dust, but in the dark corners of human ambition, fear, and the extraordinary resilience of a woman who dared to play a deadly game, and won, leaving behind a legacy shrouded in mystery, a chilling question mark in the annals of California history. This mystery shows us that sometimes the greatest fortunes are not found in plain sight, but in the shadows, built on secrets and the unwavering will of those who dare to challenge the established order. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries. See you in the next video.